Hey guys, so I am back, and as you guys requested, I am doing a review and swatch video for the Lorac Unzipped palette as well as the Lorac Unzipped Gold palette. And these are both great palettes, and we're going to jump into the pros, the cons, the hits, the misses, and some beautiful swatches of these eyeshadows. So let's just jump right into it. So first up, I like to talk about the price, and these palettes retail for $42, and there are 10 eyeshadows in here for a net weight of 0.39 ounces. And it's the same price as the Lorac Pro Palettes, either one or two. They are both $42 as well. So you're paying the same price for any one of these palettes, but for the Lorac Pro Palette, you do get a total of 16 shades. But as you can see, oh, this is messy. As you can see, these are smaller size eyeshadows in comparison to the Lorac Unzipped palette. Let me grab that. So you're getting larger eyeshadows, but you're getting less shades. And this is 0.32 ounces. And this has more at 0.39. So it depends on what you're going for. Are you going for a variety of colors where you have a bunch of colors to choose from? Or do you want a solid pick of 10 eyeshadows in larger sizes? Let's compare it to other palettes on the market. I know specifically people are gonna probably say, hey, Urban Decay Naked palettes. And the Urban Decay Naked palettes are $54 now. And they have had crazy price increase over the years. They went from $44 to, or $42 themselves, to now $54. So they've gone up $12 overall. And these contain 0.6 ounces of product, so each eyeshadow is 0.05 ounces. And you do get 12 shades versus 10 in the Unzipped palettes from Lorac. Again, it's a $12 price difference, so I really think the Lorac palettes are still worth their dime. Even though if you do the calculations, these are more pricey per ounce versus the Urban Decay eyeshadows, believe it or not. Other eyeshadow palettes on the market, you have the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette, that's $49. The Kat Von D Shade and Light palette is $46. That contains 12 eyeshadows. The Too Faced also contains 12 eyeshadows. And you will see a kind of trend here. Most eyeshadow palettes contain 12 eyeshadows or more. With the Lorac palette, their Unzipped palette, they're only 10 shades. So you're not getting as many eyeshadows, you're not getting as much product, but you are definitely paying a cheaper price. This is probably one of the cheapest palettes you can get on the market, whether you go for the Pro palette or the Unzipped palettes. They are one of the cheaper palettes, but be mindful that even though they're cheaper, you're still getting less product. So by ounce, you're paying more. But overall, I don't know how that works for you. I never use up a palette. I never use up an eyeshadow. So I'd rather spend less and get less product than to pay more and get more product that I won't use up anyway. So it depends on how you look at things. I still think it's worth the price because you're not spending as much up front as with other palettes, even though you are getting less product, but I still don't think you're gonna use up all the eyeshadows in this palette. So it's still worth it to me, you know, in my book. So let's talk about the packaging. These come in the typical hard cardboard packaging that Lorac tends to favor, just like they did with their Lorac Pro palettes. They're very sleek designs, they're very slim and slender. They're great for storage in like a large collection. They don't take up too much space. They're very portable as well, and they're great for travel. It does have a magnetic clasp, so that's what holds it shut. I don't have a problem with this in my collection. It doesn't, you know, it's quite secure and sturdy. But if you're traveling with these, I would say put them between something or put a rubber band over it, just secure it in place so it doesn't accidentally open while traveling. Inside the palette, you do have a pretty decent sized mirror if you were going to use a mirror. Some people use the mirrors in palettes. I personally don't. It doesn't stand up though, it kind of flops over, so you'd have to hold it in place, so you do a one-handed application. That some people don't like that. They prefer the mirror to actually stand so it's usable, so keep that in mind. And the eyeshadow layout goes from a light to dark theme, and they don't separate them by finishes. So the Lorac Pro palette separates it by matte and shimmers. These have mattes and shimmers throughout. They have 4 mattes and 6 shimmery shades, and they do have the names listed on or printed on the palette itself. So you don't have that insert. Even though you do have an insert, it's a protective insert, so you can remove that. That doesn't have the names on it. The actual palette itself has the names, which I absolutely love and prefer, because when I'm showing them to you, I can be like, oh, I'm using Unpredictable, oh, I'm using Undeniable, and they're right there in the palette. Another thing to note about the name just quickly is that they all have on in front of them. So you have Undressed, Uninhibited, Unpredictable, Undeniable to go with the unzipped theme, which I thought was very cute. It's a nice little twist on names. It's very creative. So that's the packaging. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the swatches now, and for reference I am using my Cosette D225 eyeshadow brush. It's just a nice synthetic blend brush, and I am going to swatch these on my arm over primer because I typically use eyeshadow with primer anyway, so it makes sense to swatch them over primer. So let's just get right into it. Here's a look at the overall palette. The first 3 shades in the top row are Undercover, Unbelievable, and Unattainable. Then we have Unconditional and Unbridled. In the second row we have Undiscovered, Unreal, Uncensored, Unspoken, and Untamed. The first shade up is Undercover, which is a pinky beige ivory shade, and it has a satin finish because there is a slight shimmer to it. It's not completely matte. Then we have the shade Unbelievable, which is a frosty pink bronze shade. This one has a highly frosted metallic sheen to it. Then we have the shade Unattainable, which is more of a neutral tone bronzy metallic shade. Shade is Unconditional. It's the first matte shade in the palette, and it's a matte rosy brown shade, followed by Unbridled, which is a matte reddened brown shade. And these first 5 shades have great pigmentation, good color payoff, minimal fallout. They blend really nicely onto the skin and they apply smoothly. Now we have the second row. The first shade is Undiscovered, which is a light yellow champagne shade. This one takes a little bit to build up, but it's still a smooth shade. Then we have the shade Unreal, which is more of an icy pink champagne shade. Again, a highly frosted metallic sheen. Then we have the shade Uncensored, which is a deeper bronzy brown shade. This one again, rich pigmentation, great metallic payoff. This shade is Unspoken, which is a deep brown with a pinky undertone. This one again takes a little bit of build up, but it's still a great shade and applies well when used on the eyelids. And here we have the shade Untamed, which is probably one of my favorite shades in the palette. It is a deep reddened bronze shade that has a subtle sheen to it. It's not a highly frosted shade, it just has this subtle, beautiful sheen. And again, here are the shades swatched. Again, nice pigmentation. A couple of these shades take a little bit more building up than the others, but overall, the complete palette has great pigmentation, great color payoff, and blends seamlessly. Here's an overall look at the shades in the palette. In the first row we have Undressed, Uninhibited, Unpredictable, Undeniable, and Unedited. Then in the second row we have Unlocked, Unlimited, Unleashed, Unwind, and Unafraid. The first shade up is Undressed, which is a gorgeous yellowed ivory shade. It is matte in finish and it builds up beautifully. It works so great as a underbrow highlight as well as an inner tear duct highlight. The next shade is Uninhibited, which is an icy yellow champagne shade. This one has chunky particles in the finish. It has like a chunkier texture, so I prefer to use this stamp to just smooth out that texture a bit. And the chunkier texture causes fallout as well, so be careful with that shade. Then we have the shade Unpredictable, which is more of a yellowy gold shade, and it has a peach undertone. You'll see that peachy pinky reflect. Again, this one has a chunkier texture as well, and I prefer to use this damp or with a very sticky base to get a smoother finish. Then we have the shade Undeniable, which is a matte brown shade. This one has more of a taupey or a neutral undertone to it. Applies smoothly, blends very well. Then we have the shade Unedited, which is a matte deep espresso brown. This one is very smooth as well, applies great, has great pigmentation. Overall, the shades apply well except for the two shimmer shades that have a little bit of a chunkier particle to the finish. Moving on to the second one, we have the shade Unlocked, which is a frosty metallic pale ice yellow shade, and this one has a better color payoff and better texture than the Uninhibited and Unpredictable shades in the first row. We have the shade Unlimited, which is a yellow gold shade, and this one has a smoother texture than the other shades as well, but it still takes a little bit of build up to get great color payoff. I would use this damp or with a very tacky base. Then we have the shade Unleashed, which is probably my favorite shade in the palette. It is a yellow bronze shade. It's like a yellow gold bronze shade, and it's so smooth, it's so beautiful, it applies great. It is highly metallic and frosted, really beautiful shade when used damp. Then we have the shade Unwind, which is a deep milk chocolate shade. This one has a neutral undertone. It's great for building up dimension in the socket of the eye. It's an absolutely smooth and pigmented shade, and it blends out beautifully. Followed by the shade Unafraid, which is again one of those shimmery shades. It's not a frost shade, it's just a dark, rich espresso brown with bronzy sheen and shimmer. Really beautiful deep shade. And again, these 5 shades are great, have great pigmentation, apply well, and work beautifully when used damp or with a tacky base. And here are the overall shades in the palette. We have those 2 troublesome shades, but apart from that, the other shades apply well and blend out easily, and the matte shades are absolutely gorgeous. Alright, so now that you've seen the swatches, let's go into the performance and the application. We will start out with the original palette, which is more of a pink theme. And these have more rose gold shades, and they do have 3 mattes in here, and there are 2 shades that are kind of matte-ish because they have slight, very fine shimmer in them, but they come off mostly matte. They're not completely matte though, there is a little bit of shimmer, and those shades are Undercover and Untamed. Undercover is that light highlight shade, and then Untamed is that deep shade at the end here, and it does still work to deepen up the crease because it's not a high shimmer or frosted shadow, so you can still use it to deepen up the crease. And I love that they have the darker shades like the crease shades, the transition shades, Unspoken, Unconditional, Unbridled. Those are matte shades, and that's perfect for creating dimension in an eye look. And the other shades, Undiscovered, Unreal, Uncensored, Unattainable, Unbelievable, are shimmer shades, and they range in shimmer. They're highly frosted to not so frosted, and they are finely milled shades. They apply beautifully, they blend beautifully, they're creamy to the touch, they're creamy on the eyes. They work really well together, alone with other shadows. I think these are beautiful. I don't have creasing issues. I don't have fade-in issues. I don't have crazy fallout issues. I minimize fallout by pressing my brush into an eyeshadow, tapping off the excess, and then pressing it onto my eye before I start blending, so I do not have trouble with fallout typically. So those are a couple of tips you can use to apply your eyeshadows. I also use an eyeshadow primer or a base, so I have something for the eyeshadows to actually stick to. What I have found also is that using the shimmer shades damp, so use a damp brush before you pick up the shades. It doesn't ruin the formula. It doesn't leave a hard finish over it, like a little layer that you have to scrape off. It doesn't do that to the shimmer shades. Don't do that with the mattes. Don't do that with the mattes. But the shimmer shades, it doesn't do that. Just use a damp brush. These give the most metallic, rich finish that you, oh my god, they're so beautiful when used damp. These shades, I think the Unzipped palette, if you're into rosy tones, into rose gold shades, into cool, you know, cranberry, pinky nudes, this is a great palette. Again, blendability, wearability, it's just great, and you can create a multitude of looks for these. You can go for really simple or really intense. I think it's a great palette overall, even for darker skin tones. I know lighter skin tones love this, but darker skin tones, I actually really love this palette. Like, the shades don't come off ashy at all. They look really good on my skin. So I really love this palette, hands down. Now we go into the Lorac Gold palette, which This one, I think when it debuted, people were like, oh my god, what is going on? This has 4 matte shades in it. So the highlight shade now is now a matte, that's Undressed. And then the other 3 are Undeniable, Unwind, and Unedited. So those 3 deeper transition kind of crease shades, those are also matte as in the Lorac, the regular palette. And I should make sure that I mention that the palettes are different. All the shades are different, even though they're a similar theme. And so the regular Unzipped is on the top and the Unzipped Gold is on the bottom. As you can see, the Unzipped original palette is pinky. It's a cooler tone palette versus the Unzipped Gold, which has gold tones. They do have a similar theme. They go from light to dark, and they do have a similar layout with the matte shades and the shimmer shades. But as you see, the shades are kind of similar, but they are like contrasting shades. One is cool, one is warm, more golden, one is more pink. So with the Unzipped Gold palette, this also works great on darker skin tones, and I thought some of the shades would be too light, too ashy, but the Undressed shade, this light matte creamy shade, works so well as a highlight. Just pop it under the brow and blend it out. Don't use too much, just blend it down. It will look so subtle and creamy because it's not white, it's not like in your face, bold and ashy. It has a creamy kind of peachy yellow tone, so it actually works well with a yellowy golden skin tone. The other shades too, because I have a golden undertone, works beautifully, looks great on me. I prefer this palette over the original because pinky shades, they can look great, but I find that I prefer golden tones on me. And what I love about the golden shades in this palette is that even though they're rich and intense, they're not like a true in-your-face yellow gold, which can look too intense on my skin tone. They're like golden yellows, not too stark yellows. So I really love the shades. The 3 matte shades, Undeniable, Unwind, Unedited, are great. They have a really deep matte brown here. This unedited shade, so creamy, builds up dimension, really great in the crease. And again, the Unafraid shade, this darker crease shade, has a bit of shimmer in it, but it still applies really well. It gives a good contrast, and in the crease area you can still build up dimension. And the other shades, the shimmer shades, are so beautiful. Again, they range from high sheen and high frost to more subtle sheen. And I think a couple of the shades that come off a little bit chunky would be, yeah, so the Unleashed and Unpredictable, even the Unlimited. You know what? The shimmer shades, the Uninhibited, the Unpredictable, Unlimited, Unleashed can come off a little bit chunky. They're not as, they're very smooth, very creamy texture, but they can come off a little bit more chunky and have fallout. So what I do is use a sticky primer, sticky base, or use these damp again, as I mentioned before with the Unzipped original palette. And using these damp, and I did a tutorial with these 2 palettes, I'll leave them linked below, you can check them out. But using these damp, oh my god, they give such a beautiful metallic sheen, but they're not like chunky over frosted eyeshadows. They just apply so beautifully. They look really great on the skin. So I thought I'd show you a couple of these shades on the back of my hand, and I sprayed my hand so it's a little damp so you can see the metallic effect. This shade is Unbelievable, this is Unattainable, this is Unreal, and this is Uncensored. And again, I applied them on a damp hand, and aren't they gorgeous? You see that metallic sheen, really pretty. These are from the original palette. So here are 4 of the shades from the Unzipped Gold palette applied damp. This is Unlimited, Unleashed, which I used in my tutorial. This is Uninhibited, and then this is Unpredictable. So you can see again that metallic sheen. Look at that. It's absolutely gorgeous. So definitely try these out damp. I highly recommend these palettes. I was hesitant because, alright, let me tell you. The Lorac Pro Palette. I like the shades. I like the texture, but I don't use this palette. I don't gravitate towards it because, and it's really just a really simple thing. I don't like the size of the eyeshadows. They're small when I'm getting them with my brush. They get all over the place. They get messy. It gets really messy. With these, you can see they're almost like triple the size of these eyeshadows. I find this easier to use with my eyeshadow brushes. I know that's a small thing, but for me, usability, practical application is key for me. I want something that I'm reaching for because I want to, and it's easy for me to use, and it's not like something that I have to be like, oh god, here we go. So I was hesitant, but then I saw that there were larger shades and I was like, I'm all about it. So I did grab these, and I'm happy that I did. And you can get these at Ulta stores. They're also available at Lorac.com, and they're also available at Kohl's. And who knew that Lorac was available at Nordstrom.com? Yes, it is. So you can use Ebates. You can get, you know, use your Kohl's cash for these. Kohl's has sales sometimes too, so you can pick them up at a discounted price. Even though I think the price is right for these palettes, you can still pick them up even cheaper or get rebates on them as well. So I definitely think they're worth checking out. Again, check out my tutorials. They're really fun. Use these damp, use these, you know, just enjoy them. And I will quickly say, I'll quickly show you the Lorac Pro Palette compared to the Urban Decay Naked One palette. Golden hues, but Urban Decay has more variety. I still think this is a more, I don't know. The Urban Decay eyeshadows, I have a problem with these pans too. But I think Urban Decay 1 and 2 are great. The Urban Decay Naked 3 palette, which is a bulkier palette, this has the pinky hues. And we'll compare that to the Unzipped palette, the original. I think this one wins out completely. Even though you have 12 shades here, I feel like a lot of the shades blend into each other and look the same. In here, I think we have shades that are diverse enough that they can give you multitude of looks without looking the same and blend in together, you know, overall. So hopefully this review and swatch video was helpful for you guys. Hopefully you know, check these out. Let me know what you think, if you have them, how you like them, and if you have them, try them damp. I'm telling you, you will love the result. Love, love, love the result. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.